Hey Smart News. Today we're going to talk about borders and boundaries and why they matter to two of the biggest stories on the planet right now, what's happening in Afghanistan, but also a story here stateside that's not getting as much attention and in any other news cycle might be one of the biggest stories out there. So really want to take a look at some maps, walk you through a couple things, but let's get started. I want to take you straight to Afghanistan. As the news develops there, it's always helpful to look at a map. When you can see Afghanistan, see the countries that are surrounding it, you can see Iran and Pakistan, and we're going to focus on Pakistan in just a moment. Afghanistan in 1919 declared independence. And so today in Afghanistan, on this date, is their Independence Day. Over the years, Afghanistan was at war with the British Empire and repeatedly, obviously, went through different phases of conflict. In 1919, August 19th, 1919 was the official declaration of independence. Eventually, that moved to what we view as Afghanistan today and diplomatic relations between Afghanistan and Britain. The reason why we look at diplomatic relations is it's a way for two different countries, two different entities to sit down at a table and say, we're actually equals, we're going to talk. We're going to recognize each other and our sovereignty. And this is one of the reasons why I'm watching to see the language used by the United States in reference to the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which would be the name that is being used right now to discuss an Afghanistan taken over by the Taliban. Will the United States officially recognize this nation and the new government? What will that new government look like? And if it's not just looking at the United States, but also how the rest of the world handles it. But I want to take you back even further than that. And this is really critical. This goes back to 1893. And what I'm going to show you here is something called the Duran Line. So in 1893, you had the British Empire in control of India. And you had Afghanistan with its own leadership. And again, using broad strokes, the British leadership and the Afghanistan leadership agreed to this Duran Line. This is drawing a line that now is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. When they did this, and this is somewhat arbitrary at the time, they actually divided a group of people called the Pashtuns. The Pashtuns still are referred to as the largest tribal society in the entire world, with a population of estimated around 40 million in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. So this line was drawn between these two groups. The reason why I want you to know about these two groups and this line specifically, remember, who controls the borders controls really the country and also the national identity. So the reason why we're really looking at this particular line is that if we look at the name Taliban, Talib is a word used in the Pashtun language. It means student. Taliban is a reference to those that are seekers of knowledge. That's what Taliban actually means. If you look back to the 1990s when the Taliban emerged, they're often tracked to a particular group of Pashtuns. It doesn't mean all Pashtuns are Taliban. That's not what I'm saying. But we're going to look at the origins of where the Taliban actually came from. Also really important to note is that along this tribal area, the Taliban have been able to pass back and forth. Think about it. If you're part of a tribe and the tribe is on both sides of the border, you're able to have sort of this passage back and forth. This is how the Taliban have operated for years, going into Pakistan at certain times, coming back into Afghanistan to fight in other times. And so this is why this line, the Duran Line, matters and why we're looking at the borders of nations right now, because it's relevant to the conversation we're having. One of the ways that it's relevant most right now is that the Taliban control the borders in Afghanistan. The reason why I want to point that out to you is our friend Holly McKay, who was in Afghanistan when the Taliban took over, was having a problem getting out. Why was she having a problem getting out? Because the United States government does not control the borders, the Taliban do. She's had a very interesting story and it's hers to tell, but you're going to see some of it on Smarter News today. She was able to navigate her way out of Afghanistan by speaking to the Taliban. And she's going to talk about her interview with them. So this is why borders matter, right? Borders, boundaries matter. They are a part of national identity. The groups that control the borders have the upper hand when it comes to saying this is what this nation is about. This is what this body of land is about. And so the reason why I want you to think about it that way is oftentimes we're discussing the United States border, right? Specifically the southern border, also called the southwest border by Customs and Border Patrol, Border Protection. The reason why I want you just to know that sometimes you might see southwest border and you might think, well, what's the southwest border? It's really what we refer to as the southern border. And there's all sorts of debate about border, right? National security and border security. And it often dissolves into these really emotional political debates. But what are we really talking about? We're talking about the definition of how a nation defines itself, national identity. And this is why the border stories tend to really run deep when you see the debates happen. It's not just a superficial political debate, it's also a very deep question about national identity. So what's happening at the U.S. southern border? Let me go ahead and show you that right now. This is the U.S. southern border, the southwest border as often is referred to. Every month we get a report about what things look like at the southern border as far as apprehensions, or what this administration calls encounters. This is when someone's coming across the border illegally and Border Patrol encounters them. Any number of things can happen from that point on, from arrest to detention, to taking them into custody, to releasing them into the United States, to expelling them. So this is why this kind of border term encounter is used by Border Patrol. What we've seen over the last several months, and if you've been with us at Smarter News, you know that we cover the numbers as they come in. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see that as well. But I think you get the point. This blue line is actually what's happening this year. And for the very first time, we're seeing a number of more than 200,000 people encountered at the U.S. southern border in the month of July alone. Now, really important. It is historic. It is important to know this is a historic number, but different administrations collect data in different ways. And because of that, what you'll often see is that this is the highest monthly number in modern data collection. It's very difficult to say it's the highest number ever because the numbers were collected differently. What I can tell you is this is the highest number ever that I've seen in my reporting or in my adult lifetime. And so over the last several months of the Biden administration, since the Biden administration came into office, we're seeing these historic peaks happen month after month after month. There's plenty of time to debate about why it's happening. I just want you to actually see the numbers today. And to also note a couple things. This is very unusual to see such high numbers. The blue line is 2021. The orange line is 2019 during the Trump administration, which was also a very historic year, but you can see the comparison between the two. The red line is what happened in 2020 during the pandemic when we shut down the border completely. So it's not a great comparison. So this is all, by the way, on our website so you can see it yourself. So a couple things I want you to know about this number. One, I want you to know that it's happening. Number two, this is very unusual to happen in July because during the summer months, this is usually when we start to see numbers decline a little bit because it's so dangerous to travel during the heat of summer. Number three, we're seeing high increases in family units and unaccompanied minors. These are unaccompanied minors, those 17 and younger traveling without a parent or a guardian. About half are expelled once they come in because of a policy that we're using in the pandemic, but others are allowed to stay. And what's the big picture of this is that when you're looking at this year, we're seeing such a historic pace that, again, is going to be in the context of the data that we collected, something that we haven't seen in a very long decades. This is going to be a very big story. I just want you to be aware that it's taking place. Some of you might say, well, let's wrap all these stories together and talk a little bit about national security, right? Who's coming across the border? A couple things that are important to note when it comes to data, monthly data. What we often get is a breakdown when looking at Mexico and then Central American countries. That's the breakdown that we get right away in about a year, and it takes some time. I mean, we just recently got the numbers that I have that are the most recent are from 2017 to 2019. That actually will give a breakdown to countries. So you can actually see, did anyone from Afghanistan come across the border? The answer is yes, a few dozen in 2019. And you can actually see all the different nations of people encountered. More to that conversation for sure. But again, these numbers just came out. They are historic numbers. And I just want you to be aware that that's taking place. But looking at these two stories, I thought this is so interesting. Who controls the border? It's not just a headline. These are really deep ideological stories about what a nation stands for. How do you define your nation when it comes to actual physical borders, but also the ideology behind it? These are how these stories are connected. So quick preview. Hallie McKay speaking to the Taliban. Wow. I want to tell you a little bit about an editorial call I made as well. All sorts of questions came up just recently about how do you cover this story? How do you cover it responsibly and in the right way? And so Holly sent me her video last night, sent me some footage, her and her amazing photographer, Jake. And I was putting it together, and I really was confronting an interesting editorial call because there are pictures of the Taliban, but I don't know who they are. I don't know what these individuals are specifically about. And I wanted you to see it. I also didn't want to elevate them to too high of a profile. Do you see how editorially I was struggling with that? Holly is the focus in her reporting and her story we want to share with you. But how do you handle the Taliban? And it got me thinking about what we're seeing in the media right now. Oftentimes I haven't watched any television, but when I have seen clips on the internet, you're seeing the Taliban in the streets of Kabul, and you're seeing their profile being elevated, right, by the footage that we're seeing. And I just had a moment of pause about what the right thing is to do. So you'll see I kind of used the photography in a little bit of a different way. And I want to tell you the reason why I did that, because I wasn't quite sure how to handle that. And so in a lot of ways, we're navigating this new chapter together. Interesting, some of the editorial calls that you have to make. But it's also one of the motivations why I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the history of Afghanistan. I thought, look at all the time we're spending talking about the Taliban on the news. And has anyone paused and said, this is what the word Taliban means? This is where the Taliban are from. This is what they've stood for in the past. I bet you could take like an hour of that and find that really fascinating. But instead, we're just going to blanket the screens with pictures of them. And this just got me thinking really about what we're doing at Smarter News. One of the reasons why I started Smarter News is I felt that so many people felt like they failed, like they were failing when it came to news consumption. They were feeling bad for not being able to catch up, or feeling bad for being discouraged by the partisanship. They were feeling that they were failing. And I'm here to tell you, you are not failing when it comes to the news. The news is failing you. This is why I left my job in a corporate media environment and decided I'm going to talk to you with messy hair in a not perfect set and figure out how to deliver value to you in a short period of time. Because if I could get you for a couple minutes a week and it's a value, then accumulating that over a course of period could actually add value to your life and free you up, mental space up, free up your time so that you can go out and you can live your story. That's what I want for you as a journalist. So a lot of big thoughts today. And as we're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11, it got me thinking even further. We just don't spend time retracing our steps enough, because when it comes to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, there weren't a bunch of Taliban on the plane. They were Al-Qaeda. The majority of them were from Saudi Arabia. How much time are we talking about Saudi Arabia right now? That's foreshadowing of what our coverage is going to look like as we go into the next couple of weeks, because we're going to be talking about it. All right, a lot to think about. I'm going to leave it there. We have an entire stack on the U.S. border on our website. I'll also post it on Instagram, but I really want to highlight Holly's work today. So that's where we're gonna really focus today, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background. All right, guys, have a great day. More at smarternews.com. Bye.